darkness falls, high above New York City, adventure reaches new heights. New action. New villains. Gargoyles. Now, every Monday through Thursday, because one day just can't hold them.
Today at 4:30 on WB22, Cable 10.
The story is told, though who can say if it be true, of a clan of medieval warriors awoken in modern-day Manhattan, of the animated series that told their story.
It is an age of darkness. Superstition and the sword rule. It is an age of fear. It is the age of gargoyles.
Welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast.
Hello and welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast. I'm Zach Joyner, the owner of the website that powers the program, spidey-dude.com, and I am the executive producer of the network that powers the program, the Spidey Dude Radio Network. Before we get started, though, I wanted to thank our patrons at patreon.com/SpideyDudeNetwork, Greg, Jurgen, Vinkman, Scott, Kaylee, and Phoenician. Thank you for your support. And if you want to get this show earlier, check it out there, as well as other fine perks that you'll get whenever you become a Patreon subscriber. There will be some exclusive content that's only for Patreon subscribers coming to you very soon. But before I turn it over to our hosts, I want to encourage you to check out our other fine programs, such as Spidey Dude Experience, ASM Classics, Make Mine Mayday, Bogan Rider Variety Hour, the Sal Buscema Era Podcast, Clone Saga Chronicles, and a Spectacular Radio, a Spectacular Spider-Man related show that starred a few familiar names to the program. Please follow the network on Twitter at Spidey Dude Radio and this show at From Eyrie, and feel free to send them feedback at gargoylesvoices@gmail.com. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast catcher, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, Amazon Audible, as well as Google Podcasts. It helps us raise our visibility. And like, share, and subscribe for more at Spidey Dude Network, youtube.com/Spidey Dude Network. Also, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as I mentioned the Twitter threads, but also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Spidey Dude Network, as well as Instagram, if you like Instagram, instagram.com/Spidey Dude Network. With that out of the way, it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce the hosts of our show, Jennifer L. Anderson and Greg Bashansky.
Welcome back, Gargoyles fans, to Voices from the Eyrie. My name is Greg Bashansky, and let me introduce my co-host, Jennifer L. Anderson.
That would be me. Hello.
Great to have you,
Hello.
Jen.
Great to be back.
And I would like to introduce back to the show, granted he's on most of the time, the co-creator and supervising producer of the first 2 seasons, Mr. Greg Wiseman.
Glad to be back again.
And we are very happy to welcome back to the show the supervising producer of the first 2 seasons, joint credit, Mr. Frank Parr.
Hello, everyone.
It's great to have you back, Frank. We're about to begin our coverage of the second season, the 52-episode second season. All right, I think we can jump into our episode coverage, but while we do that, and Greg, I know you've gone into this a bit before, and Frank, we would definitely like to hear your perspective. What was it like transitioning from season 1 to season 2?
The insanity of the whole time and schedules was quite different. What we had to work with. Everything was just, I was just looking at Leader of the Pack this morning. I haven't looked at this for years, but you have memories coming back of putting these shows together and doing the designs and the storyboarding, and everything was just a madhouse of trying to get all this stuff taken care of. I have kind of an idea of what Greg had to go through on the writing end of it, because the show holds up very well even after all these years. All the shows do, but just the sheer intensity of season 2. I often wonder, it's like, geez, when I look at some of these old shows, it would have been so wonderful to have had that extra time to really, really make these shows shine a bit more than what they do.
Yeah, I mean, we, it's always an adventure making anything at all. But I think that for season 2, we were really, really, truly under the gut. I mean, just, I know I've probably told the story 100 times for that Jen and Greg have heard it, but I can't. You're going to have to remind me if I've already told it on the podcast. But basically, season 1, I think, could legitimately be called a home run, for the studio and for Buena Vista Television, and everyone was just thrilled. It was the number one boys, the Kenner toys, for all that we've had, mixed feelings about them. And Kenner toys were the number one boys toy that first year. And the show, which was on once a week, was a big hit. And so they called us into a meeting, and they said, hey, we want to pick you up for a second season. And I was like, that's great. And they're like, we want 52 episodes for the second season because we want it to be a 5-day-a-week show, not a 1-day-a-week show. And I was like, yeah, that's not possible. We can't do that. I said, you won't be happy. We won't, because on top of that, they wanted all 52 episodes in the fall quarter. All 52 episodes would have to appear between September and mid-December. And I said, we'll never be able to get that many done in time for you. It just, it's not going to happen. And their response to that was, well, let's just say they were disappointed, put it that way. And they're like, oh, well, all right, how many do you think you could do? And I said, well, Gary Kreisel had picked us up just for 6 scripts, not to make 6 more episodes, but in the hopes that we'd get a pickup for a new season. He was willing to take the risk on his budget to pay for 6 scripts for the second season, so that we'd have a slight head start if we did get a pickup. And I said, so we've got these 6 scripts, and they're not done, but they're in the works. So I said, obviously we can do 6. And we did 13 last season. So I'm confident we could do 13 again. And I said, if we really push, I think we can get 18 done in the fall quarter. And this was, again, extremely disappointing to them. They wanted 52, and I'm sitting here going 18, so I'm like, do you want the 18? And they're like, no, if we can't have 52, then just do the 6. And then it was my turn to be disappointed because those, an order of 6, I was hoping for another order of 13. That was, to me, the sweet spot. But, if 6 was all we could get, 6 was all we could get. And so we proceeded on the basis that we'd be doing 6 more. And then about 2 weeks later, Buena Vista calls me up and says, hey, you said you could do 13. And I'm like, yeah, that was 2 weeks ago. You cost me 2 weeks. But yeah, we did 13 last season. I think we can do 13 again. And then they called back 2 weeks after that and said, hey, you remember you said you could do 18. I'm like, that was a month ago. Time passes, it shortens, the window for us to produce these things. And they're like, you said you could do 18. And so I'm like, okay, fine. I think we can do 18. We'll do our best. And then 2 weeks after that, they called and said, we're picking you up for 52. And I said, whoa. We already had this discussion. We cannot, there's no way we'll be able to do 52. I said 18 is a challenge for us now because, you called you wasted a month. Now you've wasted 6 weeks. So, and you're asking for 52. I said, it's just not going to be possible. And they're like, well, we're ordering 52. We need to do 52 for the fall quarter. And then sort of quietly, they said, look, do as many as you can for the fall. And as long as we get the rest of them, in the winter quarter or something like that, it'll be okay. And I was young and a new producer, and I believed them when they said it'll be okay, like that they'd be okay with that. And that was foolish.
Well, so we were both young and foolish.
Yeah. So we set out to do 52, and Frank and I can talk about what we had to do for a second, but I want to just jump ahead to the end result. The end result was that we managed to do 31 in the fall quarter, which I thought was a stunning achievement. I mean, I thought 18 was going to be tough, and we actually got 31 done in the fall quarter, and they were furious with us. Furious. And I'm like, hey, we had this conversation. I told you we couldn't do 52, and you guys said as long as we got it in the next quarter, it would be okay. Which, by the way, we also didn't quite achieve. We got, I think, there were 6 in the spring quarter. 6 of them didn't get done until the spring quarter. But they just, it was unforgivable that we didn't deliver them all, and they completely forgot that we'd ever told them we couldn't do 52. They completely forgot that they had told me it would be okay if we didn't do 52.
Isn't that interesting how they always forget such trivial little details?
They always forget those details. And we were to blame. It was all our fault. And so on the one hand, I was really proud of us from the standpoint of how many we had managed to do, and the overall, not that everything was perfect, but the overall quality of all those episodes, both the ones that came in the fall and the ones that came later, I thought was just an astounding achievement, given that they gave us a 10-month sliding schedule to do 13 in the first season and a 10-month sliding schedule to do 52 in the second season, minus 6 weeks. And I just thought it was this incredible achievement, and they were furious with us, never forgave us. It poisoned everything for them about the show. And they were also really mad that we kept, the second season was also the season where Mighty Morphin Power Rangers hit huge on Fox. And so suddenly we were second place to Power Rangers week in, week out, consistently. That has always disturbed me a great deal, but it's a fact. I'd love to be able to say, some weeks we beat them, some weeks they beat us. No, well, they beat us week after week, day after day, every single time. We were always number 2. We were still a hit, but we had gone from being a home run to a single or a double. And they were furious that we weren't beating Power Rangers, which was just this phenomena, and that we couldn't ever top in our second season. And so they had endless amounts of disgust with us, I can say.
Well, I'll tell you, Greg shielded most of the crew from a lot of that. He really did, because he understood that what the crew was doing, and just the lengths that they were doing to put the quality into this show. And so he spared a lot of the grisly details of upper management. So that was a good thing that sometimes you have to do as a producer, is put the welfare of your crew over.
I want to be clear too, that anger wasn't coming from our immediate bosses, from Jay Facundo or Bruce Cranston or Gary Kreisel. those guys were always tremendously supportive of everything we did, or nearly everything. This was coming at us sideways from Buena Vista, Buena Vista, which was the distribution arm for Disney. And in theory, because Disney was afraid to label the show as a Disney show, it wasn't Disney's Gargoyles. It is now, but it wasn't then. It was Buena Vista's Gargoyles. And so, for whatever reason, that just made those executives over at the distribution arm really, again, aggressively angry at us. And I don't think the crew, Frank, you had to know about it, but I don't think the crew as a whole.
No, we kept a lot of that from them. It was a tough enough, getting these things out without adding a lot of the insanity from the distribution arm, the other people that were angry. You try to keep people away from that so they can focus on their jobs. It wasn't really their job to know that stuff, So as far as they knew, everybody, it was hard. Everybody was enjoying the show, and there's, usual stress type things, but the morale amongst most of the crew was good. It would crack every now and again, but for the most part, I'd say it was good.
So now we can talk a little bit about what we had to do then to make those 52. And on my end of things, what that meant was we had, one story editor for season 1, Michael Reeves. It was amazing, but there was no way he could do 52 episodes in that short a period of time, less than 10 months. And so we quadrupled the number of story editors we had. We promoted Bryn Chandler Reeves, who was Michael's wife at the time, and one of the writers of season 1. We promoted her to story editor because she'd written some really incredible scripts for us. And then we brought in Gary Sperling, who was on staff at Disney, and he was the only staff story editor on the series because Michael, even from day one, had been a freelance story editor. It was one of the ways we saved money on the budget. But Gary was already on staff, so we brought him on, and then I recruited Carrie Bates, who had been my writing partner back in my DC Comics Captain Atom days, as the 4th story editor. And all of those people, Michael, Bryn, Gary, they wrote some of their episodes themselves, but as story editors usually do, they also, hired freelance writers to write some of their episodes. Carrie, on the other hand, only wrote all of his episodes himself. He was both a story editor and the sole writer on his story editing team. But they all did a terrific job. And what we would do is about, I would say, once a month or so, we'd bring, again, because only Gary was actually in the office. I think Michael had an office back then. We were at the Academy building, and I think Michael had an office, but I don't think he came in all that often. At least I don't recall him coming in that office. Do you, Frank?
Not really. I mean, there's a lot. Honestly, there's quite a lot that I feel like I've forgotten unless something jars my memory. It's just so right. Far back for me.
But anyway, once a month or so, we'd bring in Carrie and Gary and Michael and Bryn with Frank and I, and usually with Lydia Morano, who was another writer, but who had written enough of the episodes that we found her useful in the room. I don't know if she was there every time, but I definitely remember she was there a bunch of times. And we'd break the next set of episodes. I came up with pretty much all the springboards, which is just often just like, you know, let's do an episode set in Japan about Bushido. You know, I mean, I'm not saying they were like full story ideas. They were just notions. And I would say, okay, who wants this one? And most of the time there'd be someone there who's like, yeah, I really want that one. And every once in a while, no one would pick one. And I'm like, look, we got to do this one. So if no one volunteers, I'm going to assign it to somebody. And so usually that got somebody to volunteer. And then on very rare occasions, I would have to actually assign it to someone. And then the, 6 or 7 of us would, in the room, we just talk about each story and help each other break the stories. Not necessarily in tremendous detail, but just get a basic, verbal premise going. And then the story writers would go off and do their thing. Now, that was what we had to do on the writing side of it from a standpoint of staffing. But the other thing we had to do was I became really aware that in order to generate 52 stories, we had to really expand the world of Gargoyles. So that was why we also did the world tour in season 2, and really expanded, there are more gargoyles alive out there in different locations. There are more myths and legends. We brought in a lot of different cultural ideas and aspects, and all that felt very necessary to us in order to get 52 stories going in a very short period of time. And then on the production side, Frank, I mean, we went from Japan directing 13 out of 13 episodes in season 1 to, again, sort of Japan got their episodes, and then you directed some yourself, like today's episode. And then we hired Dennis Woodyard and Bob Klein to be directors and ultimately producers. And then even I feel like Butch Luchik even directed an episode.
Yeah, he did. That was we gave him. It was the big thing when we had to pull from. We were very lucky to have Japan, obviously, but we had to basically hire two more complete crews, and assorted freelancers to get a lot of this stuff done. Fortunately, I was able to get a lot of people that had left Warner Brothers, that wanted to leave Warner Brothers, and contacted me. Quite honestly, I didn't really have to do a lot of contacting on people, and a lot of the people that I knew that I've worked with on Batman. We had Ted Blackman, who was one of the key designers, had come on board as our character. I know as our character as our background designer, and Troy Adamitis, Butch Lukic, some of the storyboard people, Don Cameron,
Doug Murphy.
It was a very envious crew that we were able to get on such a list, honestly, and that was such a huge help in doing this, because they were all very reliable, and you pretty much depend on them and on the work that they did, and without many revisions and such. But we're very fortunate in that regard. But it was still
and on the character design side, all the original designs had been done in Japan with Frank then weighing in when he went to Japan. We pulled some of that back also. And Greg Guler, who had helped develop the show,
yes,
became one of our character designers. and Mike Vosberg, right? Is that right?
Yeah, we had Greg. Greg Guler was the in-house designer, so he had the lion's share. I brought Mike in because I liked I'd known Mike for a while, and his medieval. I brought him basically as our medieval expert because we had a lot of flashbacks to medieval times and such, and he was quite good at that. So he would freelance basically from home, and then Greg would handle pretty much the heavier loads of the massive amount of characters and other things that we had going on. On occasion, for some of the major characters, I would throw in some stuff for them to go, to help them out, at least give them a basis to work from. Just an idea that they would, Greg or Mike would take and just run with it and do their thing, as they usually do. So it was well oiled after a while. Like I said, it helps to have really good people when you do these productions. It just takes a lot. It lets you put out other fires that, there's always fires, but, you don't want too many at once.
And you guys did a terrific job. In the end, I love the second season, and we'll be going through that one by one, and we look forward to getting to all of those. But one of the things that transitioned from season 1 to season 2, small thing, but Goliath's narration over the theme music.
Right. So I can't remember whose idea that was. It might have been mine, or it might have been Gary Kreisel's, but I know there was a discussion where we were like, okay, we've been away, for a bit, and maybe people need sort of a reminder of the origin of these guys. And so I asked Gary Sperling to come up with the narration, which he did. And I made minor tweaks to it, because Gary was new to the show and I just wanted to sound like Goliath a little more, but very minor. It was basically Gary Sperling who came up with that narration. And again, the reason it was Gary, for example, as opposed to Michael Reeves, is that, Michael was freelance. So he was paid to do scripts, right? He was paid to story edit scripts or write scripts. So this sort of additional work, we didn't have a simple way to pay him for it. We would have had to negotiated a fee or something for it, because I would never ask him to work for free, do anything for free. But Gary was on staff, so, we had his time. So Gary wrote the narration, did a great job. And now, of course, it just feels so right. But at the time, it was like, do we want this? Do we not want it? And because we all liked just Carl's music, just going over the main title, and do we need to change the main title? And we wanted to put a few, update the main title a little bit. There was a lot of footage from season 1. We wanted to put a little bit of footage that we had from early episodes of season 2 in there. But how much do we need to mess with it? Like, are we fixing something that wasn't broken? But I think ultimately what it comes down to is Keith's voice is such a musical instrument in its own right that now I feel like, well, of course it made sense to do it, and it's kind of lovely. But it was a big open question. Is this the right thing to do back then?
Well, I know that we pressed back a little bit on it. But like you said, Keith's voice is so damn awesome. I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, he is a singer too. I mean, Keith's amazing, and he made it work. He let his he let the narration flow with the music. That's why it works so beautifully. So, sometimes, I like things simple, but sometimes if you're forced to go beyond what you normally think, you can come up with something that's better. I think in season 2, I look at it now and I was like, well, why was I fighting this so much? It really is quite nice. But again, as I said, young and stupid producer. Let's just say inexperienced.
Well, the voiceover definitely has become very iconic. So I'm really glad that it was added to the thing. It just it sets a tone.
Totally, and it was written down on every website in the 90s. I remember every fan site had it.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, but Frank, you mentioned young and stupid producer, but let's talk about you as a director. What was the directing process for this episode like?
Well, sometimes, because, when I was directing this, I still had to kind of go through and work with the other guys as well, with Dennis and with Bob, and make sure that they had everything they needed and that the storyboard guys had everything that they needed. So I'd have the meetings with the guys, the directors, and we would, we do the handout. Hopefully, when we had the time, we would, give them at least varied characters and maybe some rough sketches of some of the backgrounds and things to keep them going. And for me, it was like, when I do my own show, it's the same thing. I need to have 3 more characters I have to do on this show, and I could kick something out fairly quick. So I've done a lot of that. And the same thing with backgrounds. We had lots and lots of reference, so we could, borrow, steal, create, do everything we needed to make sure that the storyboard guys had the stuff they needed to tell the story properly and keep things hooked up. And that was the big thing. We had a lot of experienced storyboard people, and we would sit down and have a discussion about the script, the key images that we wanted to play in the script, that we wanted to have rest. I always, when I direct, I always like to have, each act had to have 1 or 2 big scenes that would make a great illustration. And then you kind of worked around that. That's how I always approach stuff. And when you do that, then you're developing, and you can kick that out and then get it to your storyboard guys. Even if it's just really, really rough, they can take that and that usually gives them enough to go on. And fortunately, we were doing all this in-house, so I was constantly having people run in and out of the office with questions and things. So, yeah, controlled chaos. And, not controlled, no.
Uncontrolled
sometimes
chaos.
it's trying to control chaos is a hard thing to do. But under the right conditions, you can come close at times.
The animation in this episode is just gorgeous. I love that first shot of the airplane taking off its Coyote scales, Rikers Island, and the geography is correct. LaGuardia Airport is right next to Rikers Island Penitentiary. Speaking of controlled chaos, I found that out for sure once, but
So there's a story there.
It's not too much of a story. So much. About 6 years ago, I was working as a chauffeur. I had to pick someone up at LaGuardia Airport, and so much traffic, so much chaos, I wasn't able to make the exit, so I figured I would turn around at the next exit, and sure enough, there was Rikers. And I know what story Greg is tempted to tell. If you really want to hear that, check out Spectacular Radio, the episode Competition with Greg Wiseman and Jennifer L. Anderson as guests. That's a plug.
Yeah.
I know you were thinking it, Greg. I know you were thinking it.
I think I was thinking it too. I'll admit.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
We love you, Greg. Just so you know.
Just curious as to why we started with this episode. Why were we opening with the pack for this season?
Oh God, I'm not sure I remember, but I mean, I do think that there was definitely an idea. We've got to reintroduce these concepts a bit. So, you get to see the gargoyles wake up from stone sleep again. You see them in the clock tower. You see Elisa come in and inform them. But you also, as we talked about last episode, we had changed them, or were in the process of changing them from being purely reactive characters to proactive characters. The pack has not attacked the gargoyles at the beginning of this episode. They've escaped, but the gargoyles are determined to go and recapture these guys and put them away again before the pack goes after them. Now, the pack is planning a revenge thing, right? But the gargoyles don't know or even frankly care about that. They are being proactive heroes now in a way that they weren't for most of season one. But it also allowed us in this to sort of remind the audience of various things that we'd established in season one. So Lex's prior encounter with the pack, really became an issue in this episode about him getting his priorities straight. Yes, he hates the pack and he wants them to be arrested and captured, etc. But obviously that's not more important than rescuing his buddy Brooklyn at the end when he's in danger. But it also gave the opportunity for Brooklyn to sort of take note of the way Lex is behaving and mention that he gets it because he feels that way every time Demona shows up. And you also get to see a reference to him and Bronx and Lex. Every time we go out, we wind up captured. Why does that keep happening to us? So we sort of lampshade that. And then, you even get Broadway
with the gun, yeah.
Busting a gun in half because he hates guns from the episode where he shot Elisa. So you get all 6 of the gargoyles in there in action. You get some good lines from Hudson, actually, some really great. None of us are getting any younger, kind of great Ed Asner stuff there. So we've made a real effort. It feels to me, I don't actually remember it, but it feels to me like we made a real effort to reference a bunch of aspects of all these characters and so that we were reminding the audience of who they all were. And that was true for Xanatos as well. Like, we've been gone for a while. You may not remember Xanatos so clearly. So there are a bunch of reveals in this. The first is, of course, okay, there's this new member of the pack, Coyote. We've never seen him before. And wow, he's a pretty powerful guy. He's wearing powered armor. Oh, he takes the mask off. Oh my God, it's Xanatos. Now, we were using Jonathan as the voice of Coyote, but we futzed it. We put this electronic futz on it, like the voice is coming through the speaker in his helmet. So, we thought, I think this thought would have been conscious, that some people would recognize that as Jonathan Futz. And some wouldn't know whose voice that was. Then the mask comes off and it's Xanatos, and that's reveal number 1. And then the second reveal, of course, is at the end. It's like Bronx goes to town on Xanatos' face, and we reveal
that was terrifying.
It's a robot.
Yeah,
one of my favorite moments from the entire series is Bronx.
I was watching that just this morning, and I was going, "That's pretty violent." It's like he's shaking its head and trying to rip his head off. I mean, it was nasty. So yeah, I'd forgotten that bit, but I knew he was a robot. I just couldn't remember the reveal. So.
It's a great reveal. And, again, all props to Adrian Bello, our S&P executive, who could have said, this is too violent, but we're like, he's a robot. And he's like, yeah, but Bronx doesn't know he's a robot. I'm like, oh, Bronx knows. Bronx knows he's a robot.
If anyone there knows, it's
you can
Bronx.
smell the difference, so then you get that revelation. But to me, the even bigger and more impressive revelation comes at the very end of the episode, which is when you find out why Xanatos did all this. It wasn't to get revenge on the gargoyles. Revenge, as they say, is a sucker's game. He doesn't give a damn about that. This was for love. It's because we had sort of hinted last season, discovered last season, that Fox was in love with Xanatos. Now we were revealing that Xanatos also was in love with Fox, and that the whole reason he did all of this was to make Fox look good so he could get her out of jail.
Such
and
romantic.
That was, that's the big moment. It's like that was the icing. You're the cake. I love that line.
Me too.
That's a beautiful line. It really is. Looking at that, but I was looking at that, and it rests on the head of the robotic Xanatos, and I thought, oh man, I missed an opportunity. I should have had the eye look over as he said that. Just had the eye look.
That would have been great. That really would have been great.
But that's what I'm saying is the one big regret that I have is, when you have the time, all these little things, like I said, that eye just would have went, you have time to really play with that stuff. And when you're kicking this stuff out with the order, and the schedule that we have, it's really hard to come up with all of those little things, because you're working very spontaneously to create these things from, working from the script and that. And bringing these characters alive, it just takes, you miss the finesse is what it is. And that's what it is. You can do the show, but you lack the finesse. It's like, when I'm in my discussions with the overseas studios, at Disney Japan, which is now Answer, that's what they would said. They said the big difference between really great animation and okay animation is the schedule. With the schedule, you usually have an extra person there overseeing everything that just checks everything and is able to add just a little bit here and a little bit there. But that little bit here and there, that's what brings the characters to life. It's those little special moments. It's like when we did Upgrade, and it's like, I knew I wanted to play with that head a lot more. Greg gave me the opportunity for that in Upgrade, where we could, they're bouncing. Yeah, we bounced that head around like a dang soccer ball. It was awesome.
And even once we crested in a future episode, that image of the half robot, half Xanatos head, we kept using in Coyote like on a screen on his chest over and over again. We just loved that head.
Well, you never see anything like that in American cartoon. And it's just, it's just so twisted that, it struck our personalities, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, we live for that kind of stuff.
I would like to give you both some feedback, because this is an episode I remember my first reactions to it. At the time, I was a teenager. I thought I was outsmarting the shows, and so when wait, okay. Anyway, so I'm watching this. I see Coyote, and I'm thinking, okay, that's Xanatos in armor, just like the Steel Clan armor. Then he takes off the mask, and I'm like, yeah, I thought so. But I didn't realize I was being fooled, because we were so programmed by other TV shows to think of villains as vengeful that when Coyote as Xanatos was talking about revenge, I didn't pick up on that. That was a big clue that this wasn't the guy. Then when Bronx jumps on him and starts chewing his face, a million thoughts went through my head. And again, I'm thinking of the cliches, and I'm thinking, are we going to get a villain hiding its disfigured face? Because those are a dime a dozen. Love you, Dr. Doom, but there's so many like you. But And then he gets up and...
Now there are a lot of Dr. Dooms out there.
Yeah.
But Dr. Doom was more original when he was first created by Lee and Kirby.
Oh, definitely then. I'm talking about by the time... by the time this came along, I mean.
Yeah.
But it definitely, we had been trained by cartoons at that time. I was older than Greg. But we had been trained that
Greg,
you know...
not this Greg.
Yeah. that was the typical cartoon thing, you know, like this was I'm going to just be all for revenge and they've made a fool of me, so I've got to go after them now kind of thing. And so I was side-eyeing this and going like, this seems like weird. And yeah, but that as soon as Bronx starts chomping on his face, I'm like, I couldn't believe, like, are they going to kill him off like that? There's no way they'd allow that. And, so there's that moment of confusion before you realize it's a robot where your jaw is just on the floor, like, what is happening here?
The show tricked me, and I loved it.
And that's what we wanted. I mean, that's what we wanted. We wanted people to
totally got lured in.
Yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that makes it's like what I said before. You try for those moments, those idyllic moments. Some of them stick, some of them don't. But that was one of those idyllic moments that we knew would leave an indelible image in your head watching it.
Right. I mean, I didn't even know the term TV tropes back then, but we were very aware, without having that vocabulary, we were very aware of what the tropes were and how we could use them to fool the audience. I mean, we would talk about that stuff consciously. We'll lure the audience this way, and then we'll do this. And then, you know, the hope is by the time the episode's over, the audience is surprised, but not surprised like, really, that's what you did? Never would have guessed that because it seems weird, you know. But instead they feel like, oh, of course. Because Xanatos, of course, was not a guy who gave a damn about vengeance. It feels right when you actually hear him say that at the end of the episode. Revenge is a sucker's game. True love is so much harder to come by. Of course that's Xanatos. That's our guy. But yeah, that was the idea that, you know, you'd believe as you were watching it, oh yeah, he's the villain, so he wants revenge. And, you know, we couldn't get away with that every episode. You know, once we've done that, then, you know, if we did an episode where he was after revenge, again, people would go, wait, what? I thought he didn't care about revenge. I'm not buying this, you know. But we could do it this one time at the beginning of the second season.
And then become a trope yourself.
Mm-hmm. There's a little moment that I love in the episode. Fox reading Jean-Paul Sartre. Hyena just asks, why do you read that stuff? And she responds with, because Nietzsche's too butch and Kafka reminds me of your little friends over there.
Yeah, that was very much a Michael Reedsian kind of line. I know Steve Perry wrote the episode, and maybe Steve wrote that line. I honestly don't know, because, you know, by the time I see it, Steve has gone through Michael. But I remember thinking, that is very Michael Reeves, you know?
Yeah.
That just felt like something Michael,
very much Michael
say. You know, whether that was Steve writing it because he thought this is something Michael will like, or whether Michael changed it to be that, I have no idea. But it just felt very Reevesian.
I was thinking about the choice in that because Sartre was a existentialist who believed in both self-determination and Marxism, and I can see Fox going for 2 out of those 3, but she doesn't strike me as a Marxist.
No, not particularly. But, you know your enemy. I don't know. I mean, this is all, honestly, you know, I'm fairly well read, but that's all beyond my understanding. I'm a dope relative to Reeves. If it wasn't telling a story, then I kind of lost interest in it as a student. So,
he told stories.
Michael.
He told stories. Funny enough, I actually got to use that line in real life once before the pandemic, and we all went home. When we were back at the office, the computer system would go down for hours at a time, and I would have a book there, and this day I had Jean-Paul Sartre's The Age of Reason, and one of my coworkers asked me, "Why are you reading that?" And verbatim, I gave Fox's line. They did not get it.
They set you up to say it.
No, they didn't. They did not. They really didn't. They really didn't.
Don't you need cockroaches in the office to make that line work?
There may have been. It was a really cheap office. But anyway, I just go on, Jen.
I really like Cree's performance and her increasing sense of attraction to Coyote, and then he's revealed as a robot. And I love her line. It's like a robot.
I still honestly don't know how we were allowed to keep that one. I really don't.
She's like even better, and clearly, I think when it was written, like on the page, maybe it came across as like, oh yeah, even better, like a better fighter. It's a robot, we don't have to, kind of thing. But clearly the way she reads it is very sexual.
Well, it's not just the way she reads it. It's the attitude we put on her face was made it a little, it took all doubts away.
Yeah.
I know. And somehow we got
like I said, we work long hours. Artists work long hours. They're very lonely lives.
Hyena
needs a release somewhere.
Yeah, I imagine Shackle has seen her bring home quite a few freaks.
Pumpkin, look, it's your old boyfriend's stab wound. Hey, Stab, what are you doing here?
Well, you called him.
How long has it been, Stab? About 5 years?
3, good behavior.
Come on in here. Kelly, you remember Stab wound, don't you?
You can do an entire sitcom about that.
And again, one of the things is we did plan things ahead, but we tried to always leave ourselves open to things we discover along the way, like Fox being in love with Xantos, etc. But this was another one. The idea that Hyena would sort of fall in love with Coyote, though even after she found out he was a robot, and Jackal being kind of really put off by that, became this runner throughout the rest of the show and into the comic books even. That was just a lot of fun. And it's not like we planned it. It's just, this works. This is
well,
cool.
she becomes mostly robots eventually too.
Yeah.
I mean, really twisted twins.
Really twisted.
And then at the parole board hearing, this is also just, I'd totally forgotten about this, and then I heard it last night when I rewatched the episode, and I remembered. But the head of the parole board is Jim Cummings doing his best Orson Welles impersonation.
Oh, yeah.
I remember at the recording session, I totally forgot about this till last night. It's a one-liner or two-line part or something like that. So it's like, okay, Jim's there playing Dingo with the Australian accent. So, when we did the casting for the episodes, like, we don't need an actor just to do this two-line. Who's going to do it? And Jim was obvious because he's doing an Australian accent for Dingo, so he can do this couple lines in an American accent, and it'll feel like a different character, right? But then he does Orson Welles, and Jamie and I are just cracking up in the booth, in the control room, because he's just doing Orson Welles. And then, and what you don't hear, because of course we didn't put it in the show, is that after he grants her parole, he then talks about no wine before it's time. Whatever, Orson Welles had a commercial.
Yes.
Sell no wine before it's time. Yeah.
Yeah, we will sell no wine before it's time, And so he does that, and then he does the sell no wine thing. And then the thing was, Jim's like, okay, I was kidding. I'll do it straight. We're like, no, this is good. This works this time. I mean, we won't use the sell no wine piece, but we'll use the rest of it. It's all good. And I'd totally forgotten about that till last night.
There is a bit during the middle action sequence, which makes me wonder if that raised any eyebrows as Sanderson practices. Brooklyn punches Hyena right in the face. That was no lady moment. And I've heard in the past that one of the reasons why so many superheroes don't have many female supervillains is because sooner or later the hero has to punch the villain in the face, and it's harder to do that with when it's a woman on the receiving end. And I'm not advocating violence against women or against anyone. I'm just a little bit surprised that made it in there.
Yeah, me too.
Brooklyn beats the crap out of her through the whole episode. Like,
it must have come up, I guess, but I don't remember it coming up.
Again, it's one of those things that I don't know. It wasn't. It's something that got through. I mean, looking at it now, I wouldn't do that, but I would just say, in Brooklyn's defense, he's kind of a medieval perspective on fighting. He's very brutal.
Well, also,
and Hyena kind of just, Hyena was trying to kill him. So it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's different times. I don't know. Bizarre.
And I just love Lexington throughout this entire episode, from the beginning towards the end, where he's got the particle beam rifle, and he's just out for blood. He is
so pissed off through this whole episode.
Wanted to show it's easy to sort of look at Lex and go, oh, he's the cute little one, and we're like, no, Lex is a badass. He's a warrior. It's easy to forget because he is the smallest of them, and he's into the technology and all this stuff. But
he's so darn cute.
Right, but you can't forget.
Don't let his size fool you. He makes up for it in viciousness when he fights. Mm-hmm. And as Future Tense says, he can be quite ruthless. The potential to be villain potential there at Lex.
Can't wait to talk about that one.
Right?
But I also love the animation. It's the colors, especially when that fire ignites on the ship. And Jen gave me a little bit of a lesson earlier on language when she translated the name of that ship.
It's the Otoshiana Maru, and Otoshiana is Japanese for trap. So
I must have known that once upon a time.
Well, I didn't know it, so it had to have been you. Unless Steve and Michael did something, and we just, but no, it's.
No, it wasn't.
I love little twists like that. Again, that's one of the things I always liked about Gargoyle is that the writers spent so much time adding these extra little twists in there. And
that would have been Steve or Michael, not me.
Yeah, but it's the kind of stuff, though, when you watch these things over and over again, that you eventually figure it out. It's kind of a shining moment for you when you see that stuff. The unexpected, the depth to a lot of these things. And Gargoyle had plenty of, it had more depth than many of the shows I've worked with. And that's what makes it. That's why it's special after all these years. Anybody who's watched it is because of that. So
we tried to make our episodes. Really dense. We tried to stuff as much as we could manage into every single episode. You know, hints of stuff that was coming before, payoffs of things that had come in previous episodes, little character moments, anything and everything. We really consciously strove for density. You know, not dense in the sense of stupid, but dense in the sense of layered and multifaceted and rich with a lot of material. And, you know, I think we achieved that. And, you know, the rule of thumb back then, the quote unquote conventional wisdom is that comedy repeats and drama doesn't. Action shows don't repeat, comedy repeats, because you can always laugh. But, an action show, you know, it's all about, okay, once you know how it turns out, you don't want to see it again because you already know how it turns out, you know? And we felt that didn't have to be true. Because I think we put in a lot more comedy in Gargoyles than people give us credit for. I mean, people are always telling me what a dark show it is for Disney. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. I mean, it is, but, it was also funny.
That's not why you love. That's not why you love the characters. You don't love the characters that are being serious. You love the characters when they're being light, when they're being fun, and they're being real.
But we also gave people reason to rewatch it because they'd find stuff or notice stuff in a second viewing. You know, if you've watched the whole season and you rewatch it, like, oh my God, they planted the seed way back here, or stuff like that. You know, that there were always things. That you could pick up on by watching it a second time, watching it a third time, a fourth time. There's always stuff that you could find that you didn't find the first time you watched through it. And I would talk about that even back then, and people would say to me, yeah, comedy repeats, action doesn't. I mean, like it was a mantra that they all believed.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I don't believe that has to be true. And I think the fact that we're talking about this show 25 years later kind of proves me right.
I would always, in my production meetings, I was always, you know, Barbara would always, you know, we always argue for more time because we needed the more time because the comedy shows had more time than we did. They had an extra couple of weeks more than we did on the show. And they would go, well, it's just, you're doing drama. Drama doesn't require that. The comedy guys, they need that to work the stuff out and such. And I was always like, no, you don't understand. These shows are more layered. We have to set things up. The acting and everything is just as difficult the way that we're doing this because we're treating this like a live action show. It's not the general stuff superhero stuff that you see that you would see at Hanna-Barbera or back at Marvel Productions with G.I. Joe and that kind of stuff. I mean, it was very layered character stuff that we were building, and that's, you know, and I was always having the fights, you know, for giving our storyboard people more time to do these because the shows were so layered and these things had to really be planned out to maximize the story. So yeah, I mean, people had a lot of different ideas on it. Frankly, the fact that they let us do it at all without going back and doing super print type scripts still amazes me, and that's probably more due to Greg, you know, in fighting to get that stuff because nobody, you know, yeah, it's there and it's out. You don't need all that extra stuff. Just, you know, they go in, they trade punches, everybody's okay at the end, you know, have a laugh, and that's it. And it's like, no, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you say I fought for it, and that's nice of you to say. But the truth is it wasn't so much that I had to fight for it, as that because I had been an executive, they foolishly trusted me.
Whatever gets the job done.
Remarkably, I didn't have to fight a lot. I really didn't. It's that other shows at Walt Disney Television Animation at the time, for various different reasons, were in crisis for one reason or another. And so they were keeping all these executives busy, and we were, seemingly a well-oiled machine. And so they kind of ignored us, and they're like, should we be paying? Well, Greg's on that show, and, Greg knows what the job is, and so it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then, this is why down the road, when Gary finally sort of took Frank and I to lunch and said, this is really a story for another day, but sort of said, and he was actually apologetic. He's like, guys, you guys have been doing a great job, and I really feel bad because I've not been paying attention to what's going on the show. How's it going? And we were in more or less the home stretch at that point, and we're like, oh, it's going good. He's like, so what kind of things did you do on the show? And we're like, oh, Fox and Santos got married, and Fox is having a baby, and he's like, whoa. Oh, I wouldn't do that. Don't do that. We're like, what? He's like, no. I mean, they're the villains. You can't have the villains raising a kid. That's horrible. But you can't take a kid away from their parents. So I just don't do the kid. It's okay if the villains get married, but don't do the kid. And Frank and I looked at each other and I turned to Gary and I said, Gary, it's already done. This isn't something we're planning. This is something we've done. And there's this really long pause. And I'm watching Gary, and it was like one of these moments when I'm like, I have telepathy. I know exactly what he's thinking. He's thinking, I can call a halt to this. I can put another show in crisis because I'm going to rip this apart and stop them from making this horrible mistake that they're planning. Or I can just let it go. And you could almost see the exhaustion roll over his face. And then he goes, okay, just don't dwell on it. And I'm like, and literally at that moment, I'm thinking, what does that mean? Don't dwell on it. But Frank and I just looked at each other and said, yeah, we won't dwell on it. We won't dwell on it. We got to do whatever we wanted. But it wasn't like we fought for it. We'd done it already. It was too late.
We just decided we weren't going to do any diaper changing scenes.
Right. Didn't dwell on it at all. No diaper changing.
We didn't dwell on it. Although, now that I think about it, that would have been an excellent opportunity for Lexington to shine.
Before we begin to wrap up, if we still have time, why don't we discuss the development of Coyote? Because I know that I've seen pictures of the older development versions of him, and he was very different than how he turned up as on the show. I'm looking at this picture right now of this robotic dog head.
Yeah, I mean, the original Coyote in the development was like going to be the generic pilot of all their vehicles. By the way, the name of the vehicle that the Pack fly in this was called the Pack Attack vehicle. That was the name of it because I think we thought Kenner was going to make a toy out of this too, which again they didn't do. But it had this corny name, the Pack Attack vehicle. But back when we were originally developing the show, we thought the Coyote head would just be their pilot, and then occasionally we'd stick it on a big robot body and it could, punch things. But then, as we developed season 2, we had to remember how it came about exactly. I don't know if you do, Frank, but it was probably just a conversation between you, me, and Michael, I would guess, because this was one of those first 6 scripts. So this was before before Carrie or Gary Sperling or, Bryn might have been involved because she was a writer on season 1. But I really think this was just probably the 3 of us just talking and saying, hey, what if we did this and what if we did that? But I really don't remember. I don't remember.
It's interesting because I can remember little bits and pieces, like, why don't we have him? He starts off like a guy, and then as we carry him through the series, he gets more twisted and monstrous as we continue through.
Yeah, I don't know how we got from the development version of the character to the. I mean, I know that the reason we didn't include Coyote in season 1 is that we were like, 5's enough. We don't need a 6. And then it's like, okay, we've got them in jail. And we're going to, in essence, upgrade Fox to a Xanatosian level. She's not just going to be one of the pack anymore. We're going to pull her out of the pack. So 5 still seemed like a good number of villains for the pack. So, we brought Dingo back, and we had Dingo bust out Wolf and Jackal, and then Coyote busts out Fox and Hyena, or tries to bust out Fox and Hyena, but Fox won't come. And that gives us 5 again, and that seemed good. And then, so I know why we brought Coyote in, but the actual process of turning it into a faux Xanatos is then revealed as a robot. He was always going to be a robot, but we sort of took this route to it that we hadn't anticipated when we were originally developing the show.
Well, I think a lot of that was, I don't think I was there when you came up with your initial concept of Coyote in the original development.
No, that was before you were born.
But I think once we had Jonathan Frakes and we had Xanatos and his character was cementing into who he became, I think that just kind of got everybody's imagination going of what we could do with this for fun. And it just kind of progressed from there. So, as you said, he started up, he's just kind of a pilot you get with this toy ship that Mattel was going to do whatever, or whoever was supposed to, he was in charge of it at the time, the toys at the time, and he morphed into his own full-fledged character. Like I said, we could have started him and just kept him a robot, just a mindless robot, but the robot was intelligent. And it kept growing, and it was malevolent, I guess is best.
It was like the reverse. Like in the first season, we have this big red Steel Clan robot that we think is a robot until we find out that it's actually a human. And this was like the reverse. We had the human who we find out is a robot instead. So I like that juxtaposition.
Me too.
There's a lot of those. There's a lot of those in Gargoyles, breaking the mold.
Yeah.
All right. Any other final thoughts on this episode before we begin to wrap things up?
I'm sure I'll think of something after we end this, but I can't think of anything right yet.
That's what always happens. We try so hard to hit everything. All right. This episode will be posting on July 15th. Is there anything you want to plug?
Well, I can. By July 15th, all of Young Justice Phantoms will have dropped on HBO Max. So if you haven't seen it, please go watch it. And by July 15th, the first issue or two, at least one, maybe two issues of Young Justice Targets will be out from DC Comics, available both in print and as e-comics. And that's written by me with pencil and inks by Christopher Jones and colors by Jason Wright. And Chris and Jason did those great YJ promotional posters, those 7 promotional posters. So I hope you pick up the comic. And then if you haven't seen it, there's also Catwoman Hunted, which is available by July, will be available both as a Blu-ray, DVD. You can purchase it electronically, or it will also by that time be on HBO Max.
It was really fun.
That's what I got.
Oh, nothing for me, guys. No, I got, I'm doing some, there might be something I'm going to post, a few weeks from now that I'm just having some fun playing with. But I ain't gonna say what it is.
All right. Well, we'll promote it on social media.
But
Sure.
if it, I'll show it to you guys first.
Awesome.
Cool.
And Jen, what about you? Anything you want to plug?
Nope. Just trying to get by. If you want to go check out my Redbubble, maybe buy something, that's at heyassbutt.com.
Hey, ass butt.
All right. I want to thank you all. I want to thank our listeners for following us into season 2. And stick around. We have plenty of great stuff coming up. And keep listening. And join us next time for Metamorphosis.
And don't forget to keep binging Gargoyles.
Yes. Hashtag keep binging Gargoyles.
On Disney Plus.
On Disney Plus. Keep binging it on Disney Plus.
Revenge, as they say, is a sucker's game. Robots are nothing, Fox, my dear. I can build a dozen more like this one. True love is so much harder to come by.